Hey, good girls. It's Kay and SJ. SJ here as my co host. Just realized kind of dressed like Miss Rachel, wearing my overalls today, which is the perfect thing for talking about how smut has permeated every aspect of American women's lives, at least according to the New York Times.
And in a bad way, of course, because we're
Yeah,
not having any sex.
I know. We're discussing the article, Are We in a Smut Renaissance? Which was written by Amanda Hess and published earlier this month in the New York Times. A listener sent it to me and was like, hey, look, the New York Times is talking about what the good girls are talking about. So I feel like I approached this article feeling very excited that the New York Times was writing about how all the ladies are reading smut now. And then kind of a negative approach to it overall.
It made me wonder if the author herself is not in a happy relationship, if she comes from the population that is single at any point in her life, whether that's 20s, 30s, or 40s, because how a married mom sees smut and the role that sex and smut play together, it is very, very much so. The more smut you read, the more you're likely to have sex with your partner. That to see somebody take such a different tone towards it made me feel like I was living on a different planet from her.
Yeah, she definitely seemed like she was particularly profiling, and I believe that they're out there and that we maybe tend to cover this audience less because we are not representative of it. But she was writing a lot about people who are reading smut in place of having sex because she's talking about this trend that on the whole Americans are having less sex. There's some references in there to trends towards women being happier without men. I mean, not that she cites that research specifically, but it kind of seems like it's touching on the whole thing about more and more women not having a romantic relationship or finding, the one be such a central platform in your life that it used to be. So it seems like she's talking about smut being a stand in for a relationship, which is totally true and is happening for some people, but there's
But I
no
think that she's
reference.
trying to make a relationship between two trends that are not necessarily connected. Because if anything, and there was a study done a while ago by Harold Leidenberg from the Journal of Sex Research, and it found that women who read smut are actually 74%, have 74% more sex with their partners than those who don't. People not having a lot of sex and people reading a lot of smut, like, yes, there probably is some overlap in those two
Yeah.
circles, but it is not like one is causing the other. Uh,
I agree. And she's written several things about parenting, so I assume that she is a parent. So I do feel like by default, she more fits into this category of with the
then
good
what's
girls.
up, Rachel? Come
Uh,
on.
I know, Amanda.
Yeah. Oh, Amanda.
I'm Miss Rachel. This is Amanda.
Got Amanda Hess.
Yes,
Uh,
Amanda Hess. Yeah, and so she kind of talks about it. The introduction to it is talking about it in the whole context of saying this is just the whole disconnect in America thing, blah, 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 which I feel like, again, is written about. And maybe I'm just not in that target audience of, that we're in some kind of minority and just not realizing it. But she's saying, we don't hang out as much, loss in community. Lots of people writing about that. We're ordering in more on DoorDash instead of going out. We're falling asleep to the light of our phones. She also references an article saying Ozempic blunts our appetites in more ways than one. Um,
See, this is again where I think that this woman, Amanda, feels disconnected from like the average American woman because the average American woman is not on Ozempic. Like
yeah.
it's disproportionately women and just people in general who are about ages 50 up, who I don't think she was targeting in
hmm
this. And it's about 12% of all Americans. So it's not like, oh, across the board, we're all just on Ozempic and have no sexual appetite.
I looked up the medical research on the topic. There is no direct link that's been found at this point. In fact, some people have
It reverses
experienced.
menopause and then they get pregnant.
Yeah, and like some people have experienced increased sex drive. So it seems inconclusive. The article that she linked to was a personal story of a couple in the wellness section in New York Times and was talking about them more sort of like struggling that nobody it was an interesting article that the she wasn't prepared after losing 60 pounds on Ozempic for all of the psychological side effects and how much it would just dramatically change her life. So it was a really interesting article, and that she was having sexual issues with her husband, and a lot of it was tied into the massive changes that her body went through. And I think that that's a good point that it says no doctor ever warned them about the dramatic changes that can occur in relationships when one person's body and self images undergo a radical transformation. You get warned about the physical side effects, but they seldom discuss personal, psychological, or marital consequences.
Downplay that. I just don't think that
Right,
it
right.
is common enough to say like, "Oh, yes, among all female romance readers, like this
Well, you
is."
can't blame that on Ozempic. Like, I think that you can talk about the different and complex ways that major body changes affect your sex life, but it doesn't seem like that's something specific to Ozempic so much as Ozempic was like part of the tool. So I was a little bit like, okay, just this whole idea. I was picturing the movie Wally, where the people are like, in the beginning, before
Wasn't expecting Wally to come into play here.
I know. This is basically like I'm picturing that these people are like porn Wally people, but you know what I'm talking about in the beginning? That it's just like when Wally's around all the people that have left the earth full of trash, and the people just roll around on little like hover scooters, watching stuff on their iPads and drinking Slurpees. First of all, I
So
feel like
it's really
it's a
depressing
very fat
scene.
phobic movie, other than I love the, like, save the earth aspect of it, but not the fat shaming aspect. And I think that this is the same kind of thing that we're talking about here. Whenever I hear articles like this, I feel like this is like Wall-E apocalypse kind of thing of like, "Oh, everyone's just rolling around on their iPad, drinking slushies, not having relationships with one another." And so I feel like in this, we're all just rolling around on our floating scooters, but we're reading porn stories and erotica on our iPads instead.
Maybe I don't like the article because I feel personally targeted.
That was gonna be one of my questions. She points out of how there's this phenomenon now that you can be reading anything on your Kindle or listening to anything on your headphones because it touches on audio erotica as well, that the number of women on the train that it's like, "Oh, you are sitting right next to somebody who's just listening to a very spicy story." Uh, how often would you say that that's you?
Well, I would say all the time. I mean, but that usually if I'm doing it in public, I'm more noting whether or not it was a good enough scene to earmark and read later when I am in closer proximity to my spouse. I'm
Yeah.
not like, "Oh, I wanna be turned on right now." I'm more just like, "Oh, I've been reading about this couple who's been, like, staying apart because of different barriers for 60% of the book. I finally got to it." Like, yes, I want to see, the different details of how they're gonna come
Yes.
together.
I also feel like we need a better vocabulary when we talk about smut, as a more recent, entrant to that reading that genre.
That's the books that I'm reading. I think the books that most people are reading in Cosmod, most often, like, it's really not a full sex scene until about 80% of
Yeah,
the way in,
exactly, and they mentioned the Sarah J. Maas series,
which is
getting
very,
banned.
very light on the sex
I know, so all
scenes.
these things that
Yeah.
I'm like, "Okay, I'll start reading smut, I'll start reading romantasy." I was like, "These a lot of the things that we call smut, I'm like, they're just romance." And so, yeah, it's, like, still very much like the typical romance, formula where there's the growing tension, the romantic sexual tension between the characters. Maybe at some point there's a kiss, then it gets to the full sex scene. Maybe there's 2 sex scenes in the book. Sarah J. Maas, I feel like when she was home with her baby, we've talked about seems like she gets a little bit hornier and
Definitely
then
the
just like
Nesta Cassian book was like, that is a mom who is home with her babies, and she is horny. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we went from, like, very gentle love scenes to, like, and then Cassian face fucked her.
Yeah, totally. So, which again, if anything, gets back to like the people who are really into this stuff are not like, you know, people living out their sexual fantasies alone. Like they're,
Yes, they have
although,
a partner, all that. And
yeah,
not that, and I'm not shaming single people by any means. If anything, I'm saying like, "Hey, single people, don't you feel targeted by this article, making it
yes,
feel like you're sitting there in some fantasy land?" Like those of us who are happily married are also doing the same thing, and it doesn't change. It's not like all of a sudden I want
yeah,
my husband to like put both sides of his hand. Authors love to say like he like trapped you in, almost like framed you against a wall. You're in between there, so you're all like small, weak woman, like, "Oh, ravish me." It's not like I want my husband to necessarily do that. I wouldn't mind
You'll
actually.
try it.
Yeah, yeah, but at the same time, like, if he were to do it naturally without me asking or saying anything beforehand, I'd probably be like, "This is a little dramatic. Like, what are you doing right now?"
I do love
So,
that whole category of internet videos where people are like, me reading this thing in a romance book. And it's like, oh, his like dick was so huge that like I couldn't put two hands around it. And then in real life, she's like making a
yeah.
video, like putting two hands around.
Yeah,
I
we
was like,
don't actually want it
I
that
don't think
big.
I want that. But
Yeah, but at the
yeah.
same time, I don't wanna, like, open up the book and to the love scene, and it's like, he had a perfectly nice sized penis, not too big, not too small, just right. It's like, "Okay, fine, maybe I do it want some description like, yeah, you're about to get ravished by some huge thing." I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because it's like you're reading about it. I mean, I think it's the same thing, like, similar to porn. I also thought this was interesting, like, talking about this smut renaissance, and it's like, "Oh my gosh," like, women are reading it every which way, or reading it and not turning into, like, sex with other people, and I was like, "Yo, we've had porn around since forever, and nobody's talking about that," especially because I did read some research on the topic when there was some manosphere guy saying, "Oh, I saw a video where he's like, "It's actually women who are the ones who like to watch violent porn more than men," which was, like, inconclusive if that's actually true. But the thing is that there was research showing that men are more likely to do stuff with the fucked up stuff that they watch, whereas women were more likely to just fantasize about it, but not have it play out by, like, trying to, like, be violent towards their partner after watching violent porn or something like that, and that, like, women had, in on the whole, obviously, like, a lot of variety from person to person, more capacity to be like, that was a spicy fantasy. Now, like, I will go about having, like, an adapted version with the person that I have in my real life."
That's and I've seen very, very funny videos that relate more to, like, how I perceive these books affecting my relationship, which is videos of husbands who are just sitting there, like, calmly drinking their coffee, but with an excited smirk on their face, and they're, like, waiting for my wife to finish the novel that she's working on because I get the payoff.
Yeah, yeah,
I
and
don't
it
know,
is
that
just
time
like
my husband's like, "Ooh, like, you reading
I
a
know.
book? You excited?" Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's suddenly this renaissance there's porn for women now, and it's like, let's talk about that, about why there's been I mean, and the good girls certainly have, about why there's been male porn directed towards the male gaze. I mean, obviously women can and do watch it too, and some of us enjoy it a lot. Some of us are like, well, it gets the job done. Like, it's definitely sexy or involves sex, but not doing your thing. The erotica, for example, they're interviewing the author of Quinn, which is one of the audio erotica things that is straight up erotica. It's not like some of the slow burn, technically smut kinds of things that have a sex scene.
I'm curious about audio erotica. I don't know if it would do it for me or not, but I can't knock it until I try it. Uh,
I've tried it, yeah, I mean,
or
I guess
sentient object romance. Where am I not willing to go?
yeah, I mean, if you're willing to go into sentient object romance, then I feel like you could definitely go into audio erotica. It is, so I'd say pros are yeah, you can be listening to it while you're doing things, so I feel like busy moms, multitasking, it's like if you are using your smut as I'm gonna kinda put myself in the mood, it's allowing you to multitask. I have definitely listened while folding laundry, and then I feel like I can take the time to do it more. Maybe that just speaks to me needing to stop and take a break, but I get it, busy moms. I think my downside for it is the same as listening to audiobook versions of anything that you've
Well,
read.
for me, I like don't like the fully dramatized versions that have like music in the background and everything. That's too much. And so when I listen to just the plain audiobooks, it's usually either a woman or a man who's
Mhm.
doing the voices for the other sex. And I'm like, I'm trying to imagine this guy being sexy, and now I just have like a woman doing a voice
Yeah, and then it's
for
like,
him.
"Hey, baby, blah, blah, blah."
Yeah.
So I've heard different things, like, sometimes you know how, like, romance things, it'll, like, go back and forth between, like, this chapter is written from the woman's perspective and this chapter is written from the man's perspective, so they'll, like, go back and forth, although, of course, obviously, they're still, like a little bit reading the other
I think
characters'
it's
lines.
one that's exclusively from the woman's perspective, but the
Yeah.
guy has, like, dialogue that they
Yeah.
don't bring in a special male actor for it, and I'm just like, "Oh,
I
you're
agree. The
ruining him
woman
for
doing the
me."
man's voice does kind of kill the mood. They do have sometimes have, like, other sound effects kinds of things in the background. Also one that is apparently popular that doesn't do it for me, but I can understand why it is there, is that they just have, like, sex sounds moaning things, and I think for some people who are very, like, audio in nature, they just will listen to, like, because I've seen it in those apps that it's just like, "Oh, here's, like, a 7-minute track of moaning sex sounds," kinds of things, but,
Oh
I
my
mean
gosh, I do not need to listen to a guy's grunts, that's for
oh, I think
sure.
that they're all women,
Women,
but I don't
okay.
know, yeah. Ugh, I hope
Yeah.
so, yeah, I don't think I want to listen to a man. I think that they do a good job of the ones that I've heard having very good voice actors because in this case, they are specifically choosing people who have very sexy, low voices. So, yeah, I guess if that's another thing too is, like, a sexy man's voice is what's doing it for you, then that can be kind of, good alternative. So, yeah, next episode, Kay tries audio erotica.
The Wolf King, and then the sequel is The Night Prince, and a male voice actor, and so for that, they did bring in a separate voice actor for the male, and he has this deep Scottish voice, and it is the sexiest thing in the entire world. There is, like, an entire, like, Instagram page that's just videos of him doing the
Oh,
recordings. He's
yeah.
a I mean, not to he's a pretty average-looking guy, but his voice
The
is
voice
flawless,
voice
so
for radio. Yes, that is definitely a whole subgenre for the ladies who are into the Highlander, Outlander kinda stuff. There's, like, a whole Scottish smut thing, and again, I do feel like that's one where it benefits from having the man with the deep Scottish voice reading it because, me in
if
my
you have an
head trying to
American
do
woman
Scottish
voice,
voices
yeah.
is, like,
Yeah, that's
not so great.
not sexy. So, something that I just also disagree with that I wanna put out there is this idea that men in romantasy, romance books, smut books, whatever, are creating this fake ideal that will never exist
Mm,
for a single woman. So it leaves them thinking that basically love can never be that way and it's a fantasy. So they're just going to further dig into their fantasy world. And I
yes.
actually heavily disagree. I think that the younger that you can start some of these books that do things well, the
Mhm.
better for women because I think that learning things like how to ask for what you want, how to have expectations
Yes.
about what's going to happen to you during any hookup, being comfortable, and even maybe having that fake idea in your head that like you taste like peaches or something from books, like just to get some confidence up.
Yeah.
Um, I actually think that it would lead to better sex for both people involved in the couple. Like even just me reading it as like a comfortable, confident adult, I'm still like, that's a nice idea. Maybe I'll do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know about it. Just
I
creating this
also
fake ideal for men. I also don't want the men who are in some of these books.
it, discounts our ability to tell the difference between, fantasy and reality, and in that case, even with kids in the non-smut genre, my daughter loves to read these books about, like, girls that go to school together and ride unicorns, and they all, like, have unicorn powers, and it's not like she walks away from it realistically being like, "Oh, I have been given the unreasonable expectation that I will be given a unicorn to ride at a certain age." But it does teach her nice things about female friendships. There's, like, one guy too, and the one guy, um, like most friend groups, and it's like she can tell even at age 7, she can tell the difference between the fantasy aspects of it and the nice aspects of it. So, 1, I am a little bit suspicious anytime they're like, "Oh, people will, like, read books and not be able to tell the difference between fake stuff and real stuff." But number 2, to your point, is, like, also let us set some expectations. Yeah, like, let our daughters read books about men who are,
Gonna go
like,
down on you
attentive
first.
lovers
Yeah.
and in touch with their feelings and things. This article does talk about, kind of how women are let down by men and that they are not finding authentic connections with men in real life and men that talk about their feelings. And it's like So the solution to that is the men to get their shit together,
Yeah, it's not
not
like
for us.
women cannot read these books.
Yeah, it's like, "Oh, ladies, do not get ideas in your head about, like, a man who is in touch with his emotional side and, like, enjoys going down on a woman." It's like, "Let's go fix the men." On that note, she does also talk in the section yearning for male yearning, and, just kind of like the men not being okay. The running
Well, the men
example.
are not okay. We
Yeah, I
do
mean,
worry about
we
them.
do worry about the men, but again, I don't think that the solution is for, like, us to lower our standards or, like.
To stop reading fun books that put us in an entirely different world, like
Yes, exactly. And so they use this heated rivalry example throughout the article, and point out that part of why it's so popular is because of the deep emotional connections that it's showing between two men. And we've talked about how, like, gay male romance is popular among straight ladies, and one of the theories is that it's because it just shows these men who are comfortable with themselves, who are emotionally connecting, and that is really attractive to women who are, like, struggling with their, straight little male partner who just needs some help with his feelings.
I just think in like she says, in hockey romance, we queer him. And obviously, gay hockey romance is extremely popular and is wonderful. But there is so much super popular, super well read hockey romance that's
Yeah.
straight couples that putting it as like, oh, we queer him in hockey romance is like, do you do you read these books, Miss
Yeah, and this is like in
Amanda?
audio
Because I
to go
do.
on this
Yeah.
quote, it's like in audio erotica, we disappear him, which is like, again, some of them are read by men. And in romantasy, the genre which has dominated publishing by injecting romance tropes into wizarding worlds and fairy kingdoms, we de-species him.
And I
Person
argue
interviewed
about
says of the
that.
show.
Really, in the fairy kingdoms, at least, the Fae male, which is huge among so many of like, the really popular book series, including Sarah J. Maas's, the most popular. They're not making them like not a man. They're
It's
making
not
them like
inanimate
yeah.
object porn, okay?
They're making like the Fae male is supposed to be like extremely male. They're supposed to be like extremely like possessive and aggressive and like very big about like what they want. And so it's not like
Yeah.
we're if anything, we're putting, like, too many male characteristics.
I know. Well, I mean, I guess in some ways it's interesting because it does kind of play with some of our stereotypes about what traditional masculinity looks like because it is like this, just thinking, for example, of like the biggest example with the court of the
Thorns and
Akrotar, yeah,
roses,
Thorns and
yeah.
Roses, and Sarah J. Maas. It's like, okay, so they are hyper masculine in that they're possessive, aggressive, athletic. But in other ways, they have these wings that are beautiful, and Rhysand has purple eyes, and they're a little bit like we have sparkly vampires in Twilight and things like that. So it's like ending a little bit our idea of what masculinity is, but I would say in very few of these books are they in any way like effeminate fairy characters.
Yeah,
I
they're
mean, there
super
are certainly
masculine.
like some, and like I'm also totally down with that too if we want to just play with gender. But I'm like, you're pointing out an example that to me is like,
No, they're supposed to be, like, literally huge and strong and all these, like,
and
different
have huge
characteristics.
dicks, and their
Yeah.
wingspan is indicative of how huge their dicks are that they are
Yes.
gonna Facebook
They
you
do
with.
have more stamina. That is a real thing. Like, that it is not a real thing, but it's, like, mentioned in the books, like, they're always, like, ready to go again and all these things. So to say that we're taking the man and, like, making him not the species, it's like, looks more like we're taking, like, all the characteristics that they like about themselves too and amplifying, but
Well,
that
interestingly, if you're wondering who this quote is from, it's not like
Mr.
she.
Fortenberry or Miss Fortenberry.
Yeah, it is not that she interviewed, a prolific romantasy author to kind of be like, "Oh, let's get to the bottom of this." She is a screenwriter, most known for 4 seasons of Handmaid's Tale. Another quote from her is, "When she draws sex scenes in her own scripts, she's puzzling out how to bring heterosexual men and women together in a way that feels plausible. Forget hopping into bed, quote, I don't think these people really want to be in the same room as one another," she says. And I'm like, Okay, I mean, I suppose this is what happens
What
when,
is
like,
her
your
life?
major source, yeah, when your major source for your article about, like, romantasy and, like, smut is somebody who is a screenwriter for The Handmaid's Tale, but it's like, go interview somebody who writes, like, delightful little sex stories, like, why are you interviewing somebody I'm just like, where
Yeah.
did you find your sources from?
She found the right sources for the picture that she wanted to
Yeah, I mean,
fulfill.
I guess that's as a journalist, you kinda, like, choose what your angle is going to be, and then you write to that angle, and, I mean, this is certainly
Like,
speaking
why
to,
not the
like, a certain
Bridgerton
population.
director?
Yeah, exactly, yeah, talk to Shonda about making these very silly shows that are just a delight for the senses and the eyes, and,
So pretty.
yeah, and have very little of, substance in them, and we're all very happy, and it's also just, like, talk about cognitive offloading here, people, and maybe it's not more complicated than that, and in fact, the very last line in the article is, "Somehow the discourse has gotten a bit in the way of experience," is, like, the quote that she ends with, and I'm like, "Well, you're the one
You are the discourse.
doing that,
Yeah.
like, maybe just let us have a delightful little time or write an article if you wanna have discourse about it, write an article about, yeah, like, wives who are, like, using it to give a little boost to their sex lives or
There are so many articles that are like, "Smut saved my marriage. Smut saved my sex life," all that. Like, why didn't you dig into that and
yeah.
talk to those
So
authors?
there's, like, no mention of that. I think there's no mention of it it talks a lot about how, like, a huge market share has become all of this smut and smut adjacent kind of things. So, like, let's talk about the buying power of women who like to read something a
Yeah, it's
little
the
bit
same as
racy as
Taylor
a story, and yeah, yeah,
yeah, not to, like, compare Taylor Swift to Spud, but it's like, "Oh, wow, look, women in their 30s have, like, enormous spending power, and they can
yeah,
buy when and they're all excited when Sarah J. Maas or Rebecca Yarros releases their new book, and they're gonna
yeah.
buy them, and,
I think
for
it is
me,
part
the audiobook and the main book.
Yeah, I think it is part of that whole categorization too of like when men do something, it's like worthy of note and, thoughtful and, indicative of a major cultural shift. And with women, it's defaulting towards it being something that is silly or problematic or fluffy. And we've had such good conversations about some of the underlying themes in these books or how reading something as silly as inanimate object romance can
Just
really
makes you laugh,
it
like, I
makes
don't
you
know for
laugh, and I think it can have, like, undertones that are also about sexual liberation and women finding their pleasure that are not silly, while put in the context of something very silly, and so it's like you're kind of missing that whole piece as well.
yes. So, I'm sorry, Miss Amanda, because, I mean, there was nice points made in your article that might apply to a small segment of the population, but unfortunately, it was written as if it applied to a larger number of readers, and I just don't know if the data's there to support that.
Yeah. So yeah, then there is another section that the incidence of sex scenes in films is dropping, but television, it's been on the uptick, which I feel like is just sort of in general, who watches movies anymore? And there's so much variety on TV, but they mostly pick on the shows that they call HBO's Smutiverse, extending to the whole streaming landscape and talk about Game of Thrones, which obviously has a lot of rape and incest stuff, Westworld, Succession, Industry, and it's like that it's just this very gratuitous one-up kind of sex, which is definitely a thing that's out there, but I think what you're missing is the whole diversity of the landscape and how there are, like, 20 times as many options out there for shows, same with books, honestly, as there was when we were younger. So, obviously, the ones that are the most reshareable on TikTok for you to do a reaction video are the ones that grab your attention the most. Same with books. Like, it's way more attention grabby, like we were saying, to like review a book that's about a inanimate rubber duck that comes to life and is possessed by a demon and fucks you rather than sweet little romance. And I feel like the same with TV shows. Like, there's a bunch of TV shows out there that portray romance and maybe have a little bit of sex in them, maybe not, that aren't, like, including the sex in a gratuitous way, but are just, like, sweet romances and, like, not referencing those.
Yes. Agreement that it is a broad landscape.
Yeah, and, like, Nobody Wants This, that's a really cute show. I'm trying to think, there's just been, like, some really cute shows lately that have very delightful little romance bits in them, or shows that are sexy, but it's not like this sort of off-putting, gratuitous sex that you're a little bit like, "Oh, I would be really careful about how young of a person I let watch this because without appropriate context around these fantasy worlds, like, I'd be very careful about somebody watching Game of Thrones without appropriate maturity and context." And honestly, some of those scenes in Game of Thrones, I was just like, "What the fuck?" Or Handmaid's
Yeah,
Tale too.
those
Like,
are gratuitous. So
I don't
that's
need to just,
gratuitous,
like,
but that's
watch
not.
somebody getting raped in
I
my free
don't even
time.
know why that's being clumped together with smut romantasy.
I know, and I'm
It's
like,
a different world. Yeah.
I think that, like, the smut romantasy stuff, very consent friendly for the most part, and when it's not, like, there is some more unhinged smut, and they're very good about putting trigger
Yeah,
warnings in
it's
the
all
beginning of
out
it.
there, it's very clear. There's even, like sometimes there's, like, a full chapter written beforehand, like, "This is how these scenes are there. We are not saying that this is right or anything like that. We are saying
Mhm.
to explore it in these ways." So I
They,
believe
like,
it.
put all those
Yeah.
content warnings there.
Mhm.
Yeah, so then they're talking about this research, a 2023 UCLA study of sexual attitudes of adolescents between 13 and 24, and that there's kind of a growing divide about how they feel about depictions of sex and romance on screen. And almost half of participants said that sex scenes were not needed for the plot of a film or TV show and called for more non romantic scenarios and asexual characters, which, like, again, I think it's like there's a huge diversity out there. So I'm almost with those people that, yeah, if sex isn't necessary for the plot, I don't need it to be there
I
gratuitously.
don't need it to be on the screen in a movie that's not designed to be that way.
Yeah, and I do want more depictions of people's lives where maybe their friendship, their female friendship is the hub of their life and the closest, most important thing. I do want more depictions of asexual characters, but it's like you can have all of those things and then there's just this huge TV and book marketplace and you can choose the things that speak to you and we have a lot of diversity, but I did enjoy there, other the of again, of all the choices of people that she chooses to interview for this, is Jordan, a 32-year-old Christian TikTok creator who posts anti-pornography content under the handle That's Not Love, went viral after she posted a video about how she and her husband strategized to shield their eyes during the sex scenes in Oppenheimer, which, like, I don't remember the sex scenes in Oppenheimer, was it?
I explicitly remember only because and for that movie, Cillian Murphy was so skinny that his, like, naked legs and then Florence Pugh is very f it was it
It was
was
just
a very non-sexy sex scene.
again, which
Yeah,
is like, okay, and I get that it's also not a sexy
skinny
film, so we
white
could have
legs.
eliminated that, and yeah, I don't need to watch a bunch of, like, gangly white people just, like, frolicking around with each other. So she says that she's against lustful style content, and that has in the past drawn accusations that she's a prude, but in recent years, her following has only grown. Kind of I'd be careful about being a thoughtful, well-read New York Times author writing about somebody like this and not talking about how this is also very tinged in like trad wifey kind of stuff because we went to her TikTok page and one of her pinned videos is
That guys can have celebrity crushes or watch porn or
yeah,
is
one of her pinned videos is like some text about her beliefs, but the background video is of her in like a housewife dress just vacuuming her house. It was giving trad wife, even though I think that her story seems a little bit more complicated than that. But yeah, let's talk about Jordan. She has this ranty video that's just like if your
not too smart.
husband or partner has a celebrity crush, like wants to lust after another woman, then you break up with him and say he should go be with her. And then if he would break up with him and tell him he should go be with his girlfriend and he says he doesn't want to, that he wants to be with you and that you're enough for him, then
You
you
are clearly not enough, then
yeah,
why
like
is he
because he
watching
has
those
to go
videos?
pleasure himself to other women. I'm like, why don't we all just like have our little fun side things and
Sometimes your timing doesn't align. Sometimes they aren't available exactly when you need them, Jordan. That's not love on TikTok.
well, and like most Christian people who talk about sexual kinds of stuff, I feel like it lacks nuance, right? There's a bunch of stuff on her page about how being betrayed is the worst thing of her life. So I understand that maybe she has had
Well, what was the betrayal? A husband having a like celebrity
right. So
crush?
maybe she's just a little bit easily triggered if like her husband did have an affair
If
or
your
whatever
husband has like
happened.
a parasocial relationship where he was like obsessed with a single celebrity and
Yeah.
watches all the time,
Yeah.
I would
And,
probably
like,
raise some
fantasizes
eyebrows.
about them. Yeah, I would be concerned about that. Or, like, again, if your husband has, like, a porn addiction or, like, can only get off to porn or is, like, not participating in other aspects of your life because he's busy watching porn, that's problematic. But I think a lot of the Christian TikTok influencers just have these very unnuanced approaches to things that is like, well, some people have a problematic relationship with porn, therefore all porn is bad, and it's like, I feel like the majority of people are just, like, time to time having some fun, it's a little something different. What about couples that watch porn and get off together, you know?
Yeah, there's many different ways to do this. I would like to look more into Amanda Hess and understand her angle, or if she was just trying to write a article that looked at something in a different way that
Yeah.
wasn't
A
positive.
different way,
So,
and I also can just respect the fact that, like many of these TV shows that she's referring to, we live in an age where, like, news as well as TV and books lives or dies by the number of reshares and clicks, and so something like this that is a little bit maybe in some of its takes on things, it has us here talking
yeah,
about it. I feel
so
like if she had written something that was just very, delightful, maybe the people who are part of that audience who's like, "Yes, smut is delightful."
we would have read it and smiled
We
and
would have read
not
it and
talked about
smiled
it.
and moved on,
Yeah, so
on
if
the
you're
other
playing the
hand
long game with us, we see you, Amanda, that's
well, on the other
okay.
hand, we live in such a polarized culture that if she had written something that was more in line with kind of the perspective that you and I usually give, I feel like it would
Some
have
people would
anchored
have
a
been
whole other
pissed.
subset of the
Yeah.
population,
Why
and
didn't you say that Jordan, That's Not Love, is a little perhaps needs to
yeah,
focus her energy
That's
elsewhere?
Not Love would have been,
Yeah.
posting an angry 9-minute commentary on this article if it had
Yeah,
swung more in
with
the
that
direction
engagement.
of, like, let's all just, like, cognitive offload at the end of the day and read a little bit of, a nice little story about somebody getting railed by a burly fairy.
Which
On
is
that note, Kay,
yeah.
what's on your reads list lately?
Yeah, we're gonna wrap up this episode so I can go back to finishing my book called A League of Her Own. And let me tell you, it's by Liz Tomforde, and it is delightful. It is the owner of a baseball team that's supposed to be the Chicago Cubs, and the coach slash field manager. They kind of have a forbidden romance, and it is just the two best characters. Go Liz Tomforde. She's always out for the curvy girls, so I like that because her weight's never a problem. The only reason why we know about that she is on the heavier side is because the guy is like, man, she looks so good. I love her thick thighs and everything. So go
Nice.
Liz Tomforde, and I am really enjoying In a League of Her Own.
Sweet. I'm still working my way through Alchemized. I've
It's a darker one. It is not a cheery
Ooh,
baseball one.
well, I'm also just concerned at this point because I know that there is a romance aspect in it at some point, and I get with all of these that it's like if he's a shadow daddy, that it's like he appears to be darker and more twisted than he is, and you somehow learn something about him later that you're like, oh, he had a reason, like Resand in A Court of Thorns and Roses one is like, oh, okay, like he was just pretending to be this. There's something that gets revealed where then you're like, oh, that's kind of like redeems his earlier actions when you understand why he was doing them. I am at the point in the book where I am struggling to understand how there's
That
going to
could
be
ever
anything
happen?
that would
Yeah,
happen that would make Kane not be problematic as a lover, which still enjoying it. Her writing is so skillful and I'm so
it's really
entranced by
good.
it, and a little bit horrified.
I did this wrong the last time, so I'm glad that you said it. They go by they, them pronouns.
Oh, thank
Yes.
you. I did not know
Mhm.
that. Yes. So love the writing and I'm just very into the story and also because I'm a little bit horrified, but the world building is so good that I feel like I can really picture
I
it.
think if you think of it as a dark epic fantasy versus a love story, it goes a lot smoother. Going into it, and it does, in
Mhm.
my mind, I think it does have a version of happily ever after. It might not fit other people's version of happily ever after. So for that, some people would say it does qualify as like a quote unquote romance, but I think that it really is more of this story of female strength and
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm. I do really like the main character in it, and I just
Helena.
think that she's interesting. So I will carry on reading it. And also, I will say that I do appreciate, however romantically entangled entangled she does get with Kane, the male lead, that he is also not typical, oh, he's just like so big and but he also has wings and he sparkles in the sunlight. He is described as like kind of gangly, like he kind of stopped aging, so he's a little bit in his 16-year-old body still and things like that that you're like, "Oh, I do appreciate, especially because it isn't a book that's just, like, brimming with sexual passion, that, he's not this, like, Heathcliff type. He is also just sort of an interesting
Skinny guy. Yeah.
skinny, pale guy, with magical powers.
Yes, that's
So maybe our, Amanda Hess was accurate on that one, that we have demasculinized him
oh,
in
Kane
this
is
book.
so not representative of the average romantasy
No, I know, but
character.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Again, let's speak more to the breadth, to the diversity, because we do really have, like, the whole gamut from, like, very manly men in our lumberjack reads, all the way through to,
Skinny
inflatable
little
duck
Kane.
toys
Yeah.
and skinny cane.
So it goes. Well, thank you so much for listening, good girls. We appreciate you all.